No AI was used in the making of this artwork. Welcome back to another episode of Watercolor Fire Damage, the show where I paint a watercolor and then I tickle it with happy little flames. I started a series of paintings where I'm just gonna paint all the planets. And the moon, why not? But not the Earth. It's the heavenly bodies set, right? So we're gonna be painting Mercury today. And I guess I looked up some stuff on Mercury and the color green is associated with it. So we're gonna be using green as kind of like a galaxy space background. I'm very excited about this watercolor today, and we're gonna try to get everything done in like 5 washes or less to retain the freshness of the watercolor. We do not want to lose the freshness. If the freshness of the watercolor is gone, it's over. Okay, so I started with phthalo green yellow shade. Now this is a pigment, I really like it. I use M. Graham pigments. I don't hear anyone talk about these on YouTube. I love them. These paints are made with honey and the pigment just rushes through wet and wet techniques when you're putting a lot of water down. So I really like them. So I'm just doing a wet on wet technique right here. So I'm wetting the paper and I'm not wetting where Mercury, the planet's gonna go. So I can do this crazy background, but I have the planet itself not wet so that none of that color will run into it. I'm just taking the pigment out here and pouring it directly into the paper. And the goal is to just let the color paint itself. And this is the hardest thing for me, having perfectionism, where I've just never been able to make art because I want it to be perfect, and it's never gonna be perfect. So painting in watercolor was kind of a key I unlocked for myself later in life, where I was able to just embrace the fact that I can't control everything and I'm actually making way more artwork than I ever did. This first wash is very important. So what we're gonna be doing is we're gonna be trying to go from thin and light colored to thick and dark colored. And we want to try to sneak as many of these layers in as we can on that initial wash, because that's where just like the most beautiful aspects of the watercolor will be in that first initial wash. If you try to do washes over the top, sometimes you can kill it. You can remove the freshness and lose this translucent quality that that first wash has. So we're gonna try to sneak in as many as we can here. And that's what I'm doing. I'm trying to pay attention to the consistency of the water to pigment ratio, and I'm mixing it up and I'm doing it on the fly. And it's stressful and it takes a lot of concentration, which is why I'm talking about it separately. Now it's like, you can't really see it, but I'm sitting like a gremlin. I'm up sitting like this, you know, while I'm painting. It's like high energy, like really stressed and stuff. Now I know it might seem like I'm just going crazy with the color, and I kind of am, but I am utilizing the 7 elements and principles of design to make this piece. So while it may seem random, there are ideas and principles that I'm using, like rhythm, having a good line going through the piece. I'm trying to be cognizant of leaving areas for white, the white of the paper, which you've got to kind of see into the future when you're making your painting. That's why a lot of watercolor artists really like to plan ahead. I like to plan parts of my paintings, and then I like to embrace the chaos in areas where I know it's going to look best. I'm also trying to vary the color here. I'm using a little bit of phthalo blue, and I think I mixed a little bit of ultramarine blue in too. I'm not really sure why I did that, because I was doing the phthalo green, so it might as well be all phthaloed out, right? I have this idea for this series of paintings where what I want to do is vignette all the planets so that's darkest on the edges. So that's kind of what I have in my head. With each layer of pigment that I'm adding in this first initial wash, I'm trying to mix up the paint so that it is thicker each time. That's very important. What happens is if the next coat is thinner than the last, that difference in the consistency, that water will actually invade and push into the first coat, and you'll get the pigment flowing back on itself, which is called a cauliflower. A lot of watercolor artists hate cauliflowers. I actually think they're really cool. I think they're really pretty looking if they're used intentionally in the right spot. You don't really get this look any other way. Like, you don't get it in any other medium. So you can just see on this painting that it's sopping wet, right? You can just see on this, it's sopping wet. There's tons of pigment and water. It's gonna take hours for this to dry. We'll do something about that later. I'll show you in a second. But for right now, what I'm trying to do is, like, I've got all of these soft edges that's created with the wet on wet. So now what I'm trying to do is go in and add elements of calligraphy into the background. This is all intuitive. I mean, you can practice this in like sketchbooks and stuff, but what I've just found is like, you kind of rely on your experience as an artist. And as you get better and you fail more, you will just develop a style and you will really start to feel something that feels like you when you do this process. You can see with the paper towel, I'm going in and I'm trying to soak up the excess water because this thing is just gonna take forever to dry. I think I left one of these for like over 12 hours and it still hadn't dried completely yet. And I'm running my paper towel along the edges of the piece where the tape is, because a lot of moisture can sit there, and as the paper dries, it can run into the painting and ruin it. So you gotta watch out for that. But the goal here is to make sure it just dries at a reasonable amount of time, right? Okay, we got the second wash. So piece has dried. You'll notice that the colors have lost some of their saturation and they've gotten slightly lighter. Another fun thing about watercolor, right? It changes as it dries. But I've got burnt sienna and ultramarine blue. I mixed those up. You can see that in that little dish that I've got there. And that is like the best gray that I think that you can make. So with those two, you can make this super rich black that just tickles your eyeballs and makes you feel like you're on a warm, sunny day. I'm doing the water in Mercury. I'm getting that going. And I'm gonna drop in some of this color and I'm gonna start adding some of these tones that I see in my reference photos. There's all these craters on Mercury, and there's all of this subtle change of color on the planet, but it looks like the moon. It's cratered like the moon. So we're gonna start going in and adding all this dimension with these soft edged gradients using the wet on wet technique. Now, I worked on Mercury and I can't touch it until it dries, but I could take advantage of this time with the second coat and I could start going in and making more dramatic decisions on the background. I have to be very careful because I cannot get my white back. My white is the untouched paper. And if I push an area in the background, that's it. So I gotta be careful. So I'm going in and I've marked areas with water for where I kind of want the pigment to expand to. And then I'm squeezing all of the pigment and water out of my brush, and I'm getting it to make these huge big splatters on the background. And then the area where I've painted with water is the extent to which those abstract shapes are going to grow to. You can also take a smaller brush to grab some of those soft-edged, big black shapes and pull them out so that you can add your own style and also get hard edges in there in the process. To get this really dark color, I'm using Payne's Gray, which is a cool gray, and it's pre-mixed, and it's like, why am I not just using the burnt sienna and the ultramarine blue? Well, I didn't want any of this background to have a brown or orange tone to it. So that's why I went with the Payne's Gray, and the Payne's Gray I'm using has a blue character to it. So that's gonna directly feed into the green that I'm using in the background. So I've got my green, I've got a more yellow version of that green, and then the Payne's Gray is filling in that gap of that more blue side of the green. If you want, you can push watercolors to 50 or 60 layers of paint, and you can get these photorealistic, just absolutely amazing paintings. But I feel like in the digital AI age, it's better to lean into paintings that are human and they look real and they look imperfect, I guess, for lack of a better word. All right, so we made some great strides in this wash. We've got some more drama in the background. We're starting to vignette in that space dimension. We got blacks in there. We gotta wait to see how these are gonna dry, but we've got some good contrast going on in the background. It's starting to feel like space. Okay, so we got the third wash now. Once again, we're doing wet on wet again, baby. We're gonna go in and add a little bit more contrast because some of these grays, they dried so light that it doesn't really feel like you're getting a sense of the drama of the planet. So we're going in with a darker mix of ultramarine blue and burnt sienna, getting that awesome rich gray, and we're gonna start plopping it in. So we've kind of marked out some areas where I'm gonna just go in and get this soft edge shape. I wanna highlight some of these big craters on Mercury. Mercury, over time, has shrunk as a planet, and it's created these really long cliffs called scabs, something like that. If you know what it's called, you should comment below. So now I'm going in with a smaller paintbrush now that I've laid out these soft edged shapes, and I want to start creating some hard edged shapes. So I'm going in and cleaning up those edges and making sure that they look just like how I imagined I wanted this piece to look, which is a good mix of hard edge shapes and soft edge shapes. Okay, now I got like a super fine detail brush, and I'm doing what you should never do as a watercolor artist, which is add a lot of detail. So I'm going in and just using this little brush, and I mixed up a really dark mix, almost looks black. And I'm just going in and I'm highlighting the edges of the craters. Later, I'm going to use white gouache to get the highlight edge of some of these craters. But for right now, I just want to do all the blacks at once. Now, I don't think you want to watch this in real time, so I'm going to time lapse this part and get it going faster so that we can kind of get through it. If you did want to see a video, like, dude, guys, like the raw footage is like hours long. So I don't know if anyone would want to see that. I don't think I would want to watch 3 hours of somebody painting, but let me know, comment down below if that is something that you're interested in. That is something I could add in the future. I could have like a playlist of longer videos. So while we're watching this detail work, I thought I'd mention some interesting facts that I learned while doing some research painting Mercury. It's obviously the first planet, it's the closest planet to the sun, and it's the hottest, but good grief. So the temperatures can go from 290 degrees Fahrenheit to 800 degrees Fahrenheit. Now for you Celsius boys, that's negative 178 Celsius. To 426 degrees Celsius. It's crazy. Not going on vacation there. So because of how the planets go, like because the planet, like the Earth is going around the sun and Mercury is going around faster than the sun, you get these interesting situations that happen where Mercury in the sky, if you're watching over time, it looks like it goes backwards and then it goes forwards. And this is called a Mercury retrograde. Talk to a white girl at Starbucks about this. She'll tell you everything you need to know about Mercury retrograde. But I will just hit a couple of facts here for the channel. The idea is that this happens like 3 to 4 times a year, and you should never travel or start new plans or anything like that in this time period where Mercury goes backwards and then it goes forwards again, right? Now, of course, you know, scientists like Neil deGrasse Tyson have been on podcasts and they've explained, you know, Mercury doesn't go backwards, really. It's because of how you're looking at it, the physics of it. And it's like, yeah, I know, Neil, I got it. The whole point of this is that there's these people that are superstitious that have studied this for thousands of years, and they say, well, in this time period, these things seem to happen, right? So it's like keeping track of trends, right? That happen 3 to 4 times a year. In the coffee shop, if you're talking to a white girl, you'll hear all about Mercury in retrograde, and she'll tell you that's why she accidentally texted her ex instead of blocking him. Okay, so now we're busting out the gouache. This is the evil gouache. This is the fast path to great power, but at the cost of your soul, right? Using white gouache, the traditional watercolor artists don't want you to use white gouache. I just say we've got the AI robots making the art. If it looks right, it is right. So I'm using gouache here. So this is Holbein Artist gouache right here. G630, baby. This stuff, I went through several gouaches, and I was even thinking of using acrylic paint at one point because some of the gouaches are just very, like they're very transparent. You have to do several layers of gouache. And I just want to do it once. So this one that I'm using is permanent white. So Holbein Artist permanent white. This is the stuff. I actually have heard that you're not supposed to use the designer's pigments, the designer's gouache, because that's used for graphic design purposes where eventually, like you're taking a picture, it's not supposed to last for hundreds of years, right? The problem with the designer's gouache is that it's not meant to be a permanent piece of art, right? You want to get the artist's gouache because that is meant to last as long as other pigments do. The designer's gouache is just for being used in a 40-hour work week when you're trying to go over the top of something and make it white. So eventually what'll happen is that designer's gouache will break down and you'll be able to see through it. So one of the hard parts with this painting was trying to figure out a level of detail that made sense. Mercury is this cratered planet. It's like the moon. That's kind of like one of its key defining features in the solar system. So you kind of want to be able to add in a lot of craters, but not every single crater, because it's going to be very difficult and meticulous, especially in watercolor, to go through and add every single one and make it like scientifically, factually accurate. At the same time, that's going to be something that people would just glaze over. They wouldn't even really notice it. It feels like such a waste of time. And this is why when you talk to like better artists that are masters, a lot of them will say, actually, this piece is too detailed. And I realize that that's probably the feeling that this piece is gonna have. But I don't care. I like adding it. So I was just trying to figure out what the right level of detail is here. It's not gonna be completely factually accurate. I'm trying to create like the feeling that you get of Mercury without actually replicating Mercury perfectly, right? And then I'm using the same white gouache to go in and add stars again. Now, one of the things that's tricky about this is you're constantly trying to make sure that the gouache is thick enough, so I'm using it straight out of the tube. But if you do it too much, it gets dry and it leaves this dry brush texture that gouache leaves. And it doesn't spread evenly, so you're always trying to like, do I add one drop of water here? Because you don't want to thin it too much, because then the white gouache is see-through. So it's just kind of a matter of just playing with that and getting it right. I'm going in and I'm adding the stars in kind of a pattern. I want the stars to just be like beautiful abstract shapes that have a rhythm to them and a motion. So I'm not just gonna fill in all of the stars with a diffuse color. And then I'm trying to pick areas where I feel like the white star circles will contrast with the colors in the background and give you the impression of just a ton of stars without adding every single little star in. Having said that, we are gonna do 2 coats because you can only get a certain number of stars in that first shot. And then you wanna go back in after you've kind of had some time to like let it dry and look at it. One of the things that's nice about watercolor is that you can ask the painting what it needs between washes. So while the painting is drying, you can kind of be looking at it and you can be like, what does this painting need? So in this piece, I did 2 washes of stars. The first initial wash just kind of got the feeling in there. And then where I felt like it needed to be more dense or I wanted to make some bigger stars, I was able to go in with the second wash. So as you can see, the background is supposed to be abstract, but the best abstracts feel like they could be something or they make you think about something. So with this one, I managed to get a nice gradient of colors that went from yellow to green to blue and just kind of has that analogous feel to it. I'm really happy with how this one turned out. And like before, we're time-lapsing this baby. We gotta get through this. So after the painting's done, I'm gonna pull some of the tape off here and show it, and then it's time to light it up. So that's it for Mercury, baby. You can buy the original ashes on my shop. I also have prints if you're interested in that in a variety of sizes. But if you really like this one, you should check out the next planet that I've done.